let's get going. So we'll start off with a quick presentation, and we'll cover some of the basic of how you can be more proactive with Logz.io through our alerting and AI capabilities called Insights. And then we'll jump into a demonstration right after. So here are my contact details for those of you that might have any questions. Feel free to send me an email right after the webinar at tom.z@Logz.io. I also encourage you to join our community Slack workspace at logz.community.slack.com. And besides contacting me directly, if you have any questions, you can engage with the rest of the community and Logz.io employees. So before we go into the agenda for today, I wanted to include some recommended resources for training, e-learning, and support. First, our documentation center that would really help you with anything from recommended methods for shipping and into more advanced options like utilizing our API. Also, our Logz.io Academy. That's designed to help you with ramping up and becoming a Logz.io and ELK master through self-paced courses. Last but certainly not least, our 24/7 support team is available through in-app chat, and you can ask our customer care engineers any Logz.io related question. So in terms of the agenda for today, we'll start off with an overview of Logz.io Alerts, and then we'll cover some of the alerting key requirements that are especially important when planning to use alerting proactively. We'll also cover what are cognitive and application insights and how these should be used in a proactive manner to investigate possible issues. After the presentation, we'll jump into the Logz.io platform and show some real-life examples, and at the end, we'll have a quick Q&A session. So some basics about alerting before we dive into how to use these proactively. Logz.io Alerts enable you to trigger a notification based on any query or filter applied in the Discover tab. And you can see the alert definition screen at the top left screenshot where the query is carried over from the Discover tab. You can think of this as the what you are alerting on. The two other main factors you should take into consideration when defining a new alert are the when and where. The when refers to the trigger or the relevant threshold that you would like to set for the alert, and the where refers to the endpoint you would be receiving the alert in. You can also see in the upper right screenshot the alert endpoint definition. While we have various templates for IT ops like Slack and PagerDuty available, you can always define a custom webhook as an endpoint for your alerts. In the lower screenshot, you can see an example of how a triggered alert would look like. Besides the severity that is tied to the thresholds set in the alert, you can view that there is a runbook or standard operating procedures, SOP. So whoever will be receiving the alert will know how they should act upon it. If you are configuring an alert that is tied to important visualizations and dashboards, we recommend to include a link to these as one of the steps in the runbook. Now, just under the runbook itself, you can see some samples from relevant logs. You can configure an alert to include these through the custom format option. We'll see that later on. And just selecting the relevant fields themselves. In this example, it's just used to help the engineer identify if the issue is a distributed one or just a component-specific one. Just to recap the concept of alerting with Logz.io, if there is an event or syntax that you previously needed to manually search for in order to find out what happened and you needed to query it ever so often, using alerts, you will be able to automatically get notified if this event happens at all or if it exceeds a threshold within a certain period of time. So just a couple of notes about creating alerts with Logz.io. The first step is defining your query in Kibana. That includes any active filters and the free text that is used. In terms of the alert definitions themselves, the name field and threshold are required. By default, the threshold is set to 0. So if any event matching your query will show up in your logs, the alert will be triggered and fired up. While setting an endpoint is not required, it's highly recommended to set one up so you can identify if something is going on as quickly as possible. The endpoint could be something as simple as just adding an email address that will receive the alert once it's triggered. Now, I'd like to cover some of the key requirements for creating meaningful alerts, and that is especially true when creating proactive alerts. The first step should be making sure that your logs are parsed, and what that means is that the relevant data from the logs is extracted into key value pairs, and these should be later used in the alerts query. If you have the ability to format your logs or some of them in JSON format, you're basically set in terms of parsing. But if some of them come in as raw text, the quickest and most recommended method to apply some custom parsing will be to contact our 24/7 in-app support team and just explain how the data should be extracted. And our support would apply the parsing within a matter of up to an hour or so. Additionally, if you have standard format logs like Apache Access or AWS ELB logs, you can specify the relevant log type when shipping these, and parsing will be applied automatically. A full list of pre-built log types is available in our documentation center. It's also important to identify what additional enrichment can be added to your fields and your values. So for example, if you would like to set up proactive alerting based on country or region, and your logs already include a client IP, you can just ask our support team to apply geo-enrichment to your logs. And once that's added, you will be able to use fields like country name or city name as a filter or as a grouping. We'll cover that later during the demonstration. So once you have your log parsed, the next step would be to create visualizations that will help you identify the relevant thresholds that should be set in your proactive alerts. These are normally values that can be indicative of issues in your environment, like log levels, HTTP response codes, and the average request times if you have something like that. Logz.io customers can reach out to their dedicated customer success engineer in order to get some custom tailored recommendation based on the data that is most important for their specific use case. Another recommendation regarding designing proactive alerts is to investigate past logs from past events. And the optimal method to do so is to perform some historical investigations of past events, is to use the archive and restore feature. If you have your logs archived to an S3 bucket that you own, you can set restore logs from past events to a separate sub-account. And if you might have missed any indicative fields that you would like and use them in future alerts, you'll be able to see that in that account. Another great method that can assist you with being more proactive with Logz.io is by setting up alerts on new AI insights that might show up in your logs. The idea behind cognitive and application insights is to help you spot problems that you might have missed otherwise. And connecting these with automatic alerts really ensures that you have full visibility on possible incidents as soon as these are surfaced by the platform. We'll cover more about the insights and how to alert on them during the demonstration. Now, speaking of which, let's switch over to the Logz.io platform. So the first examples of proactive alerts I would like to show you today is focused on logging levels and how you can use these in a more creative method. As mentioned, we are starting just with a standard Kibana dashboard, and this dashboard is designed to visualize the logging levels. But since my logs originally just had logging levels as a text field, I've asked our support team to also translate that into a numerical integer. And the reason behind that is to visualize an average, and you can see here and in this gauge, so we can locate the indicative values we'll later be able to use in the alerts. The benefits of using a numerical average is that you can explore the logging levels of your environment using different time ranges and different times throughout the day. So for example, we can change to 4 hours. And you can see that the value really didn't move too much. And that will allow us to understand exactly what are the thresholds that we should define in the alert as well. So let's move on and create that proactive alert. We'll start by switching over to the Discover tab. And now just to apply the filter that's relevant for this alert. In this case, I do have a saved search that is tied to the dashboard. So I'm going to reuse that, open it up, service 10, and just reapply that. That's much simpler than just reapplying the same filter over and over. And now just clicking on Create Alert will take us to the alerts definition screen. As mentioned before, you do need to add a name to the alert itself. That's required, but you can also add a description. That is where you can add additional steps for the engineers that will be receiving the alert in terms of what are they expected to do once the alert will fire up. So in the query section, you can see that the query from the Discover tab was carried over and applied to the alerts. In this case, it's quite a simple one, just filtering for the service 10 log type. You also have control over which Logz.io sub-accounts will this alert be active on. So in case you have a dev environment that is tied to a dev sub-account, you can just exclude it from this alert so you won't receive any irrelevant alerts. I'm going to skip over the group by option. We'll cover that in our next example, and we'll see how we can use that in proactive alerting as well. In the trigger section, we can just apply the same thresholds that we've seen in the average gauge visualization before. Instead of using the count or number of events option we have here, we're just going to open it up and select the average. And now we can select the level integer field that our support has added. And now we can just select the relevant threshold. So 35.5 for medium. And we can add multiple thresholds tied to different severity levels right here, 40 for a high severity. So in terms of the action or what will happen or where we will receive this alert, you can select one of the existing endpoints from the list or just create a new one. You can use the various templates that we have here for Datadog, PagerDuty, Slack, or just select the custom option and create a custom webhook that would be received by any supporting application. So moving on, let's talk a little bit about the output option. The default format will give you a one sample of the log events, but you can also use the custom format, and that will give you the relevant fields tied into the alert itself, and it will show immediately within the alert, as we've seen in the screenshots before. So let's switch over to our next example, showing how you can be more dynamic with alerts and how you can use the group by option. We'll start off by, first of all, loading a different dashboard, showing us the relevant indicative fields. These logs and this dashboard is focused on ELB logs. And because we're looking at ELB logs and we're starting off with a dashboard, we're visualizing the average request and response times. But besides that, we've also broken down these two by countries as well. And now that we have these different types of values that we can use as indicative fields in the alert, let's go back to the Discover tab and set up a relevant alert. I'm just going to edit the filter. In this case, just switch it over from Service 10 to ELB and apply, and click on Alert. So I'm going to skip over the definitions that we've covered in the previous examples and scroll directly to the group by option. You can think of groupings as dynamic filters being applied to the alert, and it's specifically relevant in this example since we can't really set an alert for each and every country name, and setting an alert on the total average response times won't get us the granularity that we're looking for. So to resolve this, we can add the country name as a group by. So just add that, and we'll select the GYP country name. Oh, sorry, there you go. And now what that means when we're adding the country name is this will apply a dynamic filter, and the thresholds that will be set will be checked against each dynamic value of this field. So now to the trigger for this alert. Just like before, we're going to set up an average option, and in this case, we'll select the processing time. Select the request processing time and set the threshold just like we've seen before, 0.08, and we'll add 0.1 as medium, as a high severity alert. For this specific alert, I would definitely recommend to use a custom format option just to include the country name and the average processing time in the alert itself. So it will be easier for the engineers to narrow down the relevant affected regions. So just to summarize a little bit, up until now, we've shown you how you can use Logz.io as a proactive tool, allowing you to locate possible issues based on fields that would most likely indicate a potential problem. But the Logz.io solution also provides automatic AI insights of possible operational events and code exceptions that might show up in the logs themselves. And the platform will automatically flag these for additional investigation. This is done through cognitive and application insights. So we'll switch over to Kibana, and we'll start off with cognitive insights. Let's refresh everything and update wider time range. So cognitive insights will show up both in the Discover tab, like you're seeing here, and also in the Insights tab. First of all, we'll start off with this example for the certificate. We'll just mark that as a filter, and you can see that we have just 2 events surfaced out of 1 million logs in the last 24 hours. So that's one initial benefit, but if we'll expand that, we'll be able to explain a little bit what are cognitive insights. And the idea behind them is that to surface any possible operational and security issues before they have any major implications. The way that's done or implemented is by comparing each one of your log events to an AI-created logs database containing events that the engineering community originally reported in articles crawled from Stack Overflow, GitHub, Server Fault, and several other sources. So in this example, this phrase that we're seeing here was matched with an insight in our database that was originally identified in the following articles. There's also the importance here, and you can customize that, but automatically that is set based on metadata from the articles themselves. But if you view and assess this article, you can always change that to what you would like. You can also set the status and maybe dismiss or solve any insights that are irrelevant for your specific environment. And you can assign an insight to one of your team members and write a quick note asking that team member what to do, and he or she will take care of that insight for you. In case you're assigning this insight to a different person, you can always create an alert directly from the insight, and that will be a great method to validate that the incident and the cognitive insight is being taken care of. So let's switch over to the Insights tab. So at the top here, you can see a quick little date histogram, and that's showing us all the plotted insights. And this includes both cognitive and application insights for this specific period of time. And there's also below, there's a list of all current insights. There is also the notification button at the top right, and this really allows you to receive insights. Receive alerts on any new insights that are showing up in your logs. So if you're aiming to be as proactive as possible and investigate possible incidents that are flagged by Logz.io, I highly recommend adding this, adding an endpoint right here. So let's move on to the second type of insight, which is an application insight. These are really intended to surface stack trace exception, and since their stack trace exceptions are quite dynamic and really notoriously hard to filter by, application insights will automatically identify and group these exceptions from common libraries like, in this case, Java, but also .NET, Python, Go, and various others, and this is based on their root cause. So one last feature of the insights I'd like to share with you today is the capability to correlate either cognitive and application insights with new deployments. We can see right here, these are called markers. So if you're sending your CI/CD logs to Logz.io and you would like to have an indicator showing every time that there is a new deployment, you can use markers. Switch to the markers right here and specify the relevant query that will indicate a new event. And every time that query will be matched, you will get a new marker showing up. And the benefit of this is that if we'll zoom in, and in case that you had a new deployment, in this case, a new update to the purpose certificate, and right after that incident, you're seeing a couple of new insights showing up, it's going to be much easier to correlate these events and understand what's going on and possibly get to the root cause and the relevant deployment much quicker. So really that wraps up the demonstration section of today. But just before we continue on to the Q&A section, I'd like to recommend some next steps for those of you who are interested in learning a little bit more. Feel free to check out our blog. There are a lot of great articles about many use cases regarding the ELK stack and Logz.io as well. There's also a complete guide to the ELK stack, and if you are taking your first steps with ELK, that's a great resource to get familiar with. If you are currently not a Logz.io customer, you can sign up to our free trial and test out the platforms. You have a dedicated trial sales engineer that will reach out through chat and will answer any questions and make sure that you're able to technically evaluate Logz.io and also answer anything else that you might have regarding the platform. And as mentioned in the beginning, our documentation center and self-paced Logz.io Academy. So with that really wraps up this section, and we can move on to our question and answer section.
Great, thank you so much, Tom. Okay, so we've got a few very good questions. I'm gonna kick it off with an easy one. Someone asked what your name is, and
so Mike.
which is an easy one. It's Tom Zohar.
Thank you, Glenn. That's correct.
Okay, so the next question. What if I would like to have the same alert shown on multiple channels or even multiple IT ops tools? Is that possible?
Great question. Yes, you can definitely do that. The alert itself is not something tied to just one endpoint. You can add multiple endpoints and also multiple IT ops if you have these defined as endpoints.
Cool, very cool. Okay, so next question. After I dismiss an alert, what if I want to go back and analyze past events that were already dismissed or solved?
Oh, an interesting one. So yes, you can definitely do that if you go to the Insights tab. There's a small section showing the filters, and the default filter is having only active insights plotted and visualized. So if you remove that and click on types, you will be able to set dismissed or solved, and you'll be able to see all past insights as well.
Huh, very interesting. Okay, last question, and then we'll let you go. Again, thank you, Tom, so much for walking us through this. How many possible cognitive insights are available in the platform?
So at the moment, there are 1,600 to 1,700 possible cognitive insights.
Wow.
And we're adding more basically on a weekly basis by continuously crawling Stack Overflow and GitHub and adding these to our internal database. So constantly adding into that.
Very cool. Okay, so thank you all the attendees for joining us. Thank you, Tom. Again, we will be sending out the recording later this week, so you'll have on-demand access to that. If you have any questions for Tom, we'll send out his contact information as well. Feel free to send us any questions. We're happy to answer them. We'll be back next week with another webinar called Get Started with ELK and Logz.io with a focus on shipping, analyzing, and visualizing your logs. Okay, so that wraps it up for us. Everyone have a great week, and we'll see you next week.